Okay, intro to part 28. In part 27, you saw basically about the engine mounts. And in part 28, it's going to be just me getting the engine back into it, a brief description of how I got the mounts bolted on, and the engine going back in place. Now, there's other things that are going to have to be done. The front mount has to be resupported. And the back of the transmission has to have a mount adapted for it. But those are going to be brief segments unless I think they need to be further explained. Some details have to be explained. They will be brief segments. Also in this update, you're going to see me doing some work inside the cab of the truck, removing the dashboard. In the general progression of things, once we got past that engine mounting into the truck, other than having to finalize the mounts and get them all secured in place and get them all supported and welding done on them, the finish welding done on them, I have to start looking at progression on this build. So we've got to start looking at how the cab is going to fit back in, what's going to have to be put in the cab, things like the engine, how the components that I need for the engine rebuild, bearings, rings, etc., etc., etc. But anyway, so this part 28 is kind of delve into some of those things. You are going to see the engine going back in and the final how it fit into the mounts that I designed for it. So here we go. I'll bring you back as I want to comment or discuss things further on other segments. But here we go, part 28. Okay, we're over here at the truck, and I just wanted to show you the mount brackets that I made are painted, and I have them both on the truck in place, ready to be bolted. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sink a couple of through bolts through the top, and then I'm going to sink some bolts through the side that will suck it in and hold it in place. I'll take you around and show you the other one. Nothing more is really changed on this thing. Here's the other one in place. And again, a couple of bolts through the top, and then a couple of bolts through the side that'll hold it onto it. Now this thing will be held on basically because of this piece of angle iron that's got this the top frame rail sandwiched in there. The bolts will be just to hold it in place and hold it to the frame solidly. I'll bring you back after I get it done. Okay, I'm not sure if this is going to work. What I had to do is put a little gasket tack onto that between the nut and the washer, just so that it would kind of stay in place while I tried to fish it back there. Got it. Okay, there it is tightened on. I'm going to go over and do the other side, the top ones, probably not today, but go over and do the other side, the top ones, and then I'll start working on the through bolts through the side. Okay, I'm over here at the haul truck, and I just finished bolting that side plate on the engine bracket plate, motor mount plate, that the rear motor mount plate on the passenger side. I bolted this one on previously the day before. What I just did though is sat the engine down into it. So that engine is now supported by that front motor mount and the rear motor mount. Chains are loose. Well, that one's not loose. Let me yeah, let me see what I can do here. Okay, now it's loose. You probably didn't see that. I had to just stick it in the thing. But anyways, loose, loose, loose. So it's in there supported. Now, what I did find out, and again, here we go with stupidity. I had talked about putting a cross brace across here. One of my viewers mentioned, actually two of my viewers mentioned it, that on trucks that have this transmission, there's sometimes a spring, a leaf spring, one of the leaves out of a leaf spring that goes from a shackle to a shackle and is just bolted directly onto that. And what a, you know, I was going to put a solid piece across there and a couple of maybe more of those rubber pucks up there to do it, but bolted solidly with using a leaf spring is an ideal situation. Now, that it's an ideal situation if I can find one. Not really sure if the frame rails on this truck are the same dimensions as the frame rails on like a semi. So trying to find one that would fit between these frame rails and I can fabricate shackle brackets, but you know, finding one that's that dimension might be an issue. So I might be going back to the solid mount with rubber pucks, but I'll bring you back and let you know about it. I just kind of really wanted to show you that it was in there. It's just sitting in there. The bolts are lined up. They're going through. So it's cool. Everything's good. We're all good. There's a couple of things that I should have mentioned from the last video too, or the last clip. I haven't through bolted this thing yet. I just wanted to set it in there and make sure that everything lined up perfectly before I went and drilled them through bolts. And I will drill them through bolts, even though it apparently is very well supported from what I've got right now. But let me just mention something else. I can drill them through bolts anytime once I realize that I've got it fits properly. With that being said, let me mention something else. I dropped this engine and transmission in from the top without the cab on. Now, will it go in without the cab on? Will it come out without the cab on? Yes, it will. What you would have to do is pull the transmission out probably, or what you could do is, if you wanted to leave the transmission in, I'm not really sure. Well, either way you would have to do it. If you wanted to leave the transmission in, what you would have to do is the transmission is going to be supported in the back on this, what you'd have to do is get like a transmission jack underneath it to support the front of it. Then you can pull this engine out. What you would have to do is, because these brackets have to come straight up off of there to work, what you would have to do is get in there and disconnect those 4 bolts that go into the flywheel housing, so that you could pull that out from around this bracket, or pull the engine out that way. So what would have to happen is the front would have to lift up. It would have to be shackled so that it would be picked up in a plane like that, so that it came out like that. But it could happen. I mean, it would be a pain in the ass, but it would work. And that was kind of my intention, is not to, and Ford people don't jump on me here, but you know Fords, to like get a diesel engine out of a Ford pickup truck, you pull in the cab and cab off of it. I mean, that's how they do it. So I didn't want that to happen here. Will it have to happen? I'm going to design the cab so that it can be pulled off as far as wire connections, etc. Because right at this point, with the head on it, I'm not really sure if you would be able to get the head off of it with the cab on it. So a lot of times what you have to do is pull the head off to work on an engine. Have head issues, valve issues, stuff like that. Would you be able to get the head off? I'm not really sure because of the cab clearance. So we'll see that. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. If you have to pull the engine out of there, it can be done. So I just wanted to mention the bolts. This turned into a lengthy conversation here. The bolts through the thing can be put on anytime. It's just resting on it from the merits of those 2 bolts holding it. And again, this thing is sandwiched in here, so it's not going anywhere to begin with. Those bolts are just holding it in place. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, over here at the haul truck, and what I've done this morning is I had this piece of 1.5-inch strap metal. Strap is in 1.5 wide, not scrap. Strap. Strapping. I had it laying around, and what I did was I took and on the anvil kind of contoured this shape here, because again, it kind of starts out levelish and then rolls down, but it rolls over too. So what I did is I started shaping it on the anvil, and I got tired of walking back and forth across the shop to the anvil, so I brought the anvil over here. But I kind of contoured it to fit into the contours of that frame where it rolls down there. And then originally what I was going to do is I was going to put that twist in there and weld it onto the front of that support. But now what I'm going to do is, instead of welding it, I'm going to bolt it to the front of the channel iron. So it's bolted on top, bolted on the bottom. So when I go to put it on, I don't have the issues of having to line up all of the holes with a fixed bracket because it's welded. I can just keep the bolts loose on the thing, and then get all the bolts started into it, and then tighten it up as a unit. Now I still have to adjust that, because I came up with the idea of bolting it to the front of the channel iron after I had started making it. So what I'm going to do is I'll bring the torch over and contour it over. I'm going to heat that bend up where I put the twist in there. I'm going to heat that up and contour it over so that it meets up with the front of that. I'll cut the bottom off of it at an angle so that it's flush with the bottom of the channel iron, and then through bolt that thing in there. I used the existing bolt holes that were in the frame. Let me, I'll shut you off, take you over to the other side and show you the existing bolt holes. And there is a bolts on the other side. This is a passenger side, and here's what I was talking about. It kind of starts out flat for a little bit till it gets up close to that bolt hole, and then it rolls down, but it also rolls off at an angle too. So that's why I kind of forged it on the anvil to fit the contour. You know, I didn't get it exactly precise, and there it is over there. I didn't get it exactly precise, but really close, and then when I put the bolts in, it drew it into the contour of the thing precisely. So that worked out good. I'll bring you back when I'm done with it. I don't have another piece of that 1.5-inch strapping, so I'm gonna have to go get some to make the other side here. Okay, so we're over here to the haul truck, and I am gonna start a new segment every time something happens. It's gonna be called, like, kick myself in the ass corner. I have always been talking about these mounts, or been talking about these mounts for the last probably month or so, about getting them in and what I was going to use and stuff like that. So we all know about the front mount and the flywheel housing mount, but there was the back of the transmission mount, and I told you that I was going to make a brace across here and just put it across there with a couple of pieces of rubber on it. And two of my viewers said, well, you know, some of them transmissions have a loose spring in there. And I'm thinking, why the hell didn't I think of something like that? I mean, why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't I go online and Google the transmission mounting bracket to kind of find out what it was to begin with? So then I started thinking about it. Yeah, maybe I can go down the salvage yard and find an old one of them mounting springs out of it. Then I said to myself, well, you know, if I had an old leaf spring around, I could fix that. But I didn't. So then I thought, why don't you see if you can find a leaf spring? So lo and behold, this is a leaf spring from a trailer from Tractor Supply. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use the one leaf out of it, but I'm going to use that. And I just came up with that this morning. I was still thinking about it this morning and thinking, man, I don't really want to go all the way down to the salvage yard and then have him say, well, we'll find one, and why don't you come back, you know, next week and we'll have it ready for you. But here I am with this, and I'm, you know, again, I'm kicking myself in the ass for not thinking of this to begin with. So anyways, here it is. Tractor Supply. It's a leaf spring out of for a trailer of some kind. I Googled it or looked it up online and on their website, and it said it was in stock at my local store. So I went to my local store. People at the local store had a problem finding it, but they did have it. So what I'm going to do, take it apart. Like I said, probably just use the one leaf that's got the shackle brackets for it, or the shackle ends for it, and I'll make shackle brackets that comes off of this, and just drill this thing out and mounted onto those studs. But that's where we're going with that. Okay, so in the video, I kind of alluded to having to go places with the truck and kind of figure out some other things that had to be done. One of the things that I have started filming, and I'm not going to include it in this this segment, but one of the things that I started filming is I was removing the dashboard. One of the things that I've got to kind of figure out is there was some existing gauges in there, and I would kind of like to duplicate those gauges as far as styles goes, where it has a black backing and white letters and white pointer. Now, I'm not sure how many of the gauges, the original gauges, I'm going to keep in the truck, but I would like to have all the gauges kind of look the same. You know, there's some things that I'm going to do in the truck. I'm going to try and maintain that old brake lever, that old style brake lever, and maintain the rest of the dashboard. Now, one of the things that I want to talk to you about, and is going to be coming up in the next segment, is I've got to figure out if I have to cut this out, and what if I cut it out, how big is it going to be rebuilt to fit around everything. But the thing that I've got to figure out on the inside is I have a bunch of gauges and switches, and it's going to have to be fuse boxes that I have to mount in there someplace. And I was kind of thinking of getting the switches and the gauges over off of the dashboard or off of the floor. I can't be off of the floor because of the access panel that you're going to have to get down into the transmission. But so I'm going to have to hang it off of the dashboard somehow over kind of in front of the shifter, so it's accessible and the gauges are readable. The switches would be accessible and the gauges readable from the driver's seat. So that's one of the things that I'm going to I'll throw it in the next segment and discuss that in detail. But anyways, guys, that should do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe.